Welcome back to what should be a fairly sad edition of Instigating with Clarkie and Drury. No Clarkie this week. He's on vacation. The guy needs it. So I'm very pleased to be joined by our next guest, a first-timer on the show. And if you're a Leaf fan, you should recognize this guy. But if you don't recognize this guy in the chat here with me, you should. Let me introduce the host of Leafs Morning Take on the Leafs Nation, part of the Nation Network, with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill. It airs every day, 11 a.m., Monday to Friday, and he appears as well on TLN After Dark with the fantastic Zach Phillips. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to welcome on the Golden Muzzy himself, Nick Alberga. Nick, how are you, brother? Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure. How are you today?
I'm doing well, man, and you know what? I mentioned it off the top. Let's just dig into this. I mean, it's kind of old news at this point, but obviously everybody witnessed what happened on Sunday, having to get up early and watch Canada unfortunately lose 2-1 in overtime to the Americans. And yeah, a tough one for sure. I thought Canada played well, but what were your thoughts, obviously, on this transpiring? There's the photo that's famous all around the U.S. for good reason. Jack Hughes, the OT winner. What were your thoughts on how everything went down on Sunday, man?
Yeah, look at those chiclets on Hughes, and obviously will be a hero for many years to come. Curious, like 20, 30 years from now, I think we're all going to be looking back, at least in the States, and thinking of Jack Hughes and the golden goal for Team USA. But, the first thing I would say is how much I missed NHL players being at the Olympics. It had been 12 years to see the best on best on the Olympic stage. And I thought it was tremendous. I thought it was great. The games were awesome. It lived up to the billing. Like, I wondered after the Four Nations, how can you compete with that? And it certainly competed, and then some. Like, to get Canada and US, the rematch in the gold medal final. I'm one of those Canadians who chose the high road. I think maybe the team that played the best in the game didn't necessarily win, but that happens a lot in pro sports. It happens a lot in hockey. There's a reason why goaltenders or at a premium, or top level goaltenders are at a premium. I thought Connor Hellebuyck was outstanding in that game. I do think it's unfortunate it comes down to 3-on-3. I'm not labeling it as an excuse. It's part of it. I mean, the same sort of thing happened with the Olympics way back when in 2010, the McDavid goal last year in the Four Nations. So it's part of the program, if you will, but I think you have to credit the Americans. They found a way to get the job done. Good execution by Jack Hughes going 5-0 there on Jordan Binnington, and the party rages on in the States. But I honestly think it's good for the sport. It's good for the game that the States won. I just think it continues to grow this rivalry a bit.
I have a tough time disagreeing with that, and I felt the same way. Like, I was obviously disappointed. I want Canada to win by 1 billion every time, obviously, and they had loads of chances. Like, I mean, there were a bunch of people, bagging on 3-on-3, including John Cooper after the game, which I didn't necessarily love. You knew what you signed up for, and Canada had a lot of great chances. The old expected goals folks were out in force online, and one of the most useless stats in sports, in my opinion. You didn't put the puck in the net, and that's what it comes down to, unfortunately. And it leads to images like this. This was, I think, the best thing that came out of it was the guys having Johnny Gaudreau's jersey and bringing his kids on the ice. And, they panned up, and his parents were up there in the stands, and Guy was very emotional. Like, that was an awesome thing that they did. And I also agree that it was great for the sport. It's about growing the game, and hopefully this inspires a bunch more American kids and kids of all the nations that took part to play the game. I don't know how much you really want to touch on some of the negative stuff that's come out of this with the American side. Obviously, it is probably the hugest talking point in American sports right now. What'd you make of all that stuff? Because, there are a lot of people that have the stance of, just let them celebrate. It's no big deal. And then there are a lot of people that are like, no, we have a real problem with how everything's kind of shaken down with this team.
Yeah, I mean, from the Canadian perspective, it's been, pardon my French, a shit show the last couple of days, where for some reason we've lost sight of what happened. And that's Team USA won the gold medal in Milan at the Olympics, and they're celebrating, plain and simple. And like it always does, it turns into a political shitstorm, and that's what's transpired the last couple of days. I mean, I could only speak from my point of view, covering the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm celebrating the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think this is great for Auston Matthews. I thought obviously he's a pivotal piece, was a pivotal factor in that American team at 7 points in 6 games. I don't know if people truly understand the magnitude of wearing the captaincy for your nation the way he did, but aside from that, to win it for the first time since 1980, like, you're an absolute rock star. And I think with that in mind, there are several things that go along with being the captain of Team USA, the first team to do it since 1980. They win it on the golden goal there from Jack Hughes. And, I'm going to step aside from the political standpoint. I think you sort of humanize situation. If you're in those shoes, what would you do? How would you handle things? Once in a lifetime is all I can think of. And putting, again, every political preference out the door and out the window, your chance to go to the White House, pretty damn cool. Like, you're on top of the world right now. If you're Auston Matthews, you just won gold. It's something that's been evading that nation for a long period of time. They've really been the underdog over the last couple of years. You're Auston Matthews. You haven't had a lot of success in your NHL career. You blend that all together. The guy's on cloud 9. He's got the Bernie Lomax vibes. Weekend at Bernie's. He's having a good time, having fun. I had no issue with what he did. And again, this is not about politics for me. This is about a guy who understands his role as the captain of Team USA.
Yeah, 100%. And I respect that take. I mean, a lot of people want to leave it alone. A lot of people don't. Yeah. And I mean, that's your prerogative, however much you want to engage with that storyline. I understand it's a tough thing to ignore, but for some people, they're trying their best to just make this about hockey. I'd ask you then, obviously as a diehard Leaf fan covering the Leafs professionally, does him winning the gold medal change how you feel about him just in terms of the narrative that surrounds him? Can't get it done in big games, not a winner. What's your kind of take on how you're feeling about the captain of your beloved Leafs?
Honestly, like, I would firstly say, like, I don't think this has hurt the stock, Auston Matthews, his stock, the way he played in the Olympics. Did I think he was out of this world? No. The other thing I would bring up a year ago, and I think it's just so cliche in broadcasting, we try to bring or create these narratives. A year ago, all the talk was, well, Mitch Marner finally won on the biggest stage, and he scores the OT winner in 3-on-3. Then he sets up McDavid to win the championship at the Four Nations, different player. Well, they got to the Stanley Cup playoffs. It was the same Mitch Marner. So I think this is a tool. It could be a springboard for Auston Matthews, but ultimately, has it differed my opinion and how I feel about that guy come playoff time or come big games? Probably not, but I definitely think he commands and deserves that respect. I mean, I just talked ad nauseum about the role, the importance of being the captain of Team USA, and just the input and what he put forth from a leadership standpoint, defensive savant. Like, I think he was incredible defensively, not only in the gold, but throughout the tournament. Led by example, had some big-time goals, provided offense, like exactly what that team needed. But it still remains to be seen. I still think it's up to Auston Matthews when or if he gets back to that pinnacle of the Stanley Cup playoffs, what he does there. But I think he could definitely use this as a stepping stone for sure.
I would certainly hope so. And again, it's a tremendous triumph. And again, to me, like, it can be a lazy narrative sometimes because this is a team sport. And in my opinion, it's the hardest one to win in because it's not like the NBA where LeBron can be on the floor for 45, 48 minutes, if he wants. If you're an elite player like Auston Matthews, generally you're playing 21, 22, maybe in dire situations, 24, 25 in a 60-minute hockey game. And it just reinforced that this is about a team. You need a team around you to be able to achieve these things. And when we talk about guys' legacies, he has cups, he doesn't have any cups. I don't think that that's a fair thing to do. Like, do I feel any differently about how good Jarome Iginla was and how scary it was to watch him play on the ice because he didn't win a Stanley Cup, because his team didn't win a Stanley Cup with him on it? I don't feel any differently about how great Henrik Lundqvist was or how great Carey Price was or Marcel Dion. Go down the list of great players in any sport through Dan Marino. I think it's unfair to go, well, he never won a championship. Well, there were a bunch of guys around him that could have helped too. So I definitely think that gets missed in a lot of these conversations. Part of the conversation that inevitably ends up happening when Canada loses a major hockey tournament is is something wrong with Canadian hockey? Do we need to have a summit? Like, what's your take on that whole narrative? Do you think we need some kind of wake-up call in this country when it comes to our hockey programming? Because I think there's a lot of things wrong with the game and the way it's run from a structural level. I think Hockey Canada itself has a lot of work that they need to do to maybe make the game more accessible for people, which is a conversation you could have for hours. But overall, in terms of what we're cranking out in terms of elite talent and the team selection, I don't know if that's a fair take necessarily here, Nick.
I agree. I would just add too, like on your take about like measuring guys. I think the only time that we go into that realm where it's like how many times this guy won is when you're comparing the all-time greats. I think that that has to stand for something. I don't really view this team or this, entity much different than I did prior to Sunday's final. It gets back to the whole conversation about lazy narrative. So if Canada comes back and they score an OT, are we suddenly calling Connor McDavid a winner and saying he's a winner? Conversely, is Auston Matthews that much different because Jack Hughes scores a goal in 3-on-3? I just think it's lazy journalism. And it has been a big topic of focus the last couple of days. And especially McDavid and McKinnon getting so much heat. Like personally, not even sure McKinnon was healthy. I don't want to speculate too much, but he did get rung pretty well earlier on in that tournament, was puking on the bench. Didn't look like the same McKinnon, but I think people just want a reason or an excuse as to what went wrong. I don't really have much to say naysaying wise with this roster. They were right there. They played unbelievable, and I hate to sound like a Leafs fan. It's not really the case in the way they played, but the right there point was valid. They had an unbelievable outing. Connor Hellebuyck was indisputably the difference in that game. They had 2 breakaways in that game. They had a 5-on-3 power play. So many different chances to capitalize. McKinnon missed the net. So I think when you looked at compared to the States, execution was a big story, but obviously scoring in 3-on-3 was massive. So I think that's why in the last couple of days we haven't seen those narratives be as prevalent where like, where's Bedard? Where's Schaefer? Where's Bouchard? Because I think Canada proved that they were the best team in the tournament. As I talked about earlier on, the best team doesn't necessarily win all the time. And so that's what I chalk it up to. The one thing I will say, though, I think next time they pick a team, and I think Macklin Celebrini was a perfect example of the reason why they should think this way. I think they should throw age out the window. And that's why, hindsight's 2020. Maybe Matthew Schaefer should have been on this team. I understand why you go with experience, but I think Macklin Celebrini proved why it's okay to go with young players in a tournament setting like this. He was one of their top players. So if you got the talent, I'm putting you on my roster, plain and simple.
I agree with that. And I think, I agree. It's not necessarily fair to have the conversation of, oh, they picked wrong players and they did this, and they were a shot away from winning another gold medal, and nobody would be saying that. But I do agree. Like Matt Schaefer, I got a lot of eyes on him during his OHL career and couldn't believe the way he was dominating kids at his age. And then he walks into the Islanders and he's putting together arguably the best teenage season by a defenseman in the history of the NHL. And I don't know that you can necessarily drop a narrative where you say, oh, but the Olympics would be too big a stage for him. He's dummying people in the National Hockey League. The kid's a freak. So I completely agree. I don't believe that it should be we need veterans. You can have veterans, but don't overlook these guys that are proving that they can do it at the highest level, if not higher than most of their peers. Let's move on from the Olympics. I don't want to talk about that anymore. It was a tough one to watch. Let's talk about the Leafs Nation. Obviously, it's something that you guys are super passionate about. Everybody, especially if you're a Leafs fan. I'm not even a Leafs fan. I watch your guys' content because it's really entertaining. You guys have great guests on from the hockey world. LeafsNation.com. Follow them on socials. It's a great show on YouTube, including TLN After Dark. Zach gets so fired up on there sometimes. It's a lot of fun to watch. Tell us a little bit about the history of this and kind of your involvement with it and how the whole thing kind of got started.
Yeah, so firstly, I would say you could subscribe on YouTube at the Leafs Nation 401. I've been with the company now about 3.5 years, now owned by Better Collective. Prior to that, it was a startup called the Nation Network, which is still an entity, but the best way to describe it is that the Nation Network has little sublets. So like Flames Nation, Oilers Nation has been around for a long period of time. They got us. We even have a podcast in Ottawa. We have podcasts in Montreal. So it's something they're spreading throughout the country. So essentially what happened 3.5 years ago, in fact, I was in between jobs. I thought I was trying out for the morning show job in Calgary, and I was doing it hybrid from my condo in Toronto. And I found out after the fact that I wasn't even in the running for the job. But anyways, Pat Steinberg, who is a great host on that channel, was speaking to Frank Saravalli, who used to work with my company. Frank indicated that they were looking for somebody fresh and innovative to host like a Maple Leafs daily podcast covering the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Pat threw my name in there. Within 2 weeks, I had a job offer, and it really was the perfect fit. I could say truly after 3.5 years, I've had so much fun just pretty much starting the operation to where it's at now, nearly about to hit 21,000 subscribers on YouTube, able to use and showcase my Rolodex, all the guests we have on the show. And, the other part of it's being able to meet guys like Zach Phillips, who's been such a tremendous addition. Producer Vic Paladian, who I worked with at Sportsnet, now part of the team. And, of course, Jay Rosell, the former Toronto Maple Leaf, who was very green. If you go back and watch the first couple podcasts, you wouldn't believe this is the outspoken guy that you see on a daily basis. So having had that opportunity to I love the idea of my broadcasting career now, 15 years in, to work with former players and, work with them and try to improve them. And I think you see like Jay Rosell is another prime example of like practice makes perfect and repetition and all that. So it's been a blast. Yeah, we're continuing to build here. Of course, you just referenced the Leafs Nation is the entire brand. We're sort of the offspring with Leafs Morning Take and the Leafs Nation After Dark. And of course, you got a website as well, the leafsnation.com, with a team there that headmans the written portion of our website in our coverage, I should say.
Yeah, and you guys, like I said, you do a great job. And I mean, a lot of it is just, it's Leaf-centric, of course. But there's a lot of general hockey chat that happens on there, too. I'd encourage anybody to check you guys out, particularly Leaf fans. I've turned a couple of my buddies who are huge Leaf fans onto your stuff. They love it. They watch every show now. I think it's must-have content if you're a Leaf fan in particular, because you guys kind of are able to come at it in a bit of a different way than some of your traditional media can kind of come after this stuff. And Jay, like you talked about Jay a little bit there, Jay Rosell, who was as tough a customer as they come in the NHL. I mean, that guy put his body on the line every single night, it seemed. He has become quite an interesting character. He's, if I could compare it to something like he's kind of like the O-Dog for you guys. Like he just comes at it with a different type of mentality, a different type of kind of verbal aggression at times when it's warranted. And like you guys have a really good kind of yin and yang relationship. He seems like from afar an incredibly fun guy to work with. What's your relationship kind of been like with him, and how has it changed since you guys have started doing this?
Yeah, he's a beauty. He shoots from the hip, and you couldn't ask for much more from a co-host or a broadcaster, which especially in 2026 is hard to come by. That's why Jeff O'Neill is one of my favorite broadcasters. I like Kevin BX. I really, really, admire and respect sort of that role. And I think credit to Rosie too. Like, I think he fully comprehends he wasn't the best player in the NHL, but he still lived it. He's lived it as a Toronto Maple Leaf. So like, how hard is it to find somebody who's actually been in those skates, in that room, feeling the pressure of the media? And I think that's sort of the unique aspect or quality of all this. And I also love the fact that he's not afraid to speak his mind, and he can answer the bell. Like you just talked about it. He played in the league, he used to fight in the league. There's nothing I don't think he would say on the show that he wouldn't say in person. Like he can back it up, which is hard to find. And yeah, I think one of my strong points as a broadcaster is being able to get a rise out of people. And that's why I've made a career of this thing over the last 15 years. And so that's why I think we mesh really good together, because I know exactly what to say to make him tick or make him go on a crazy rant or get him going. And I think we work well in that capacity. Yeah. So the team in general has just been a lot of fun to work with. Like you wake up every day motivated and driven to put out content and have some fun, even though there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. Certainly this season hasn't gone according to plan for this Maple Leafs team, but it's been a fun ride thus far.
Well, on the note, let me see if I can stoke your fire a little bit here. I mean,
Do
it's
it.
funny you mentioned up and down. Were you reading a little bit from Keith Pelley's letter? What did you make of the letter that came out yesterday to season ticket holders from that gentleman there, the president of MLSE? I mean, it read, I don't know, man. I read it and it read just a little lame to me. I mean, I read it and I'm not even a Leaf fan, and it kind of made me raise an eyebrow a little bit. Like, really, this is the tact you're taking? What did you make of what Keith Pelley said in that letter? Because it was not received well, if I can put it quite softly, by Leafs Nation.
It was vague. I think the major talking point for me that really stood out was his reference to injuries being a major catalyst for why this season has gone the way it's gone. And maybe he's got amnesia or he doesn't want to, accept. But the first 25 to 30 games, it was a complete no-show. And granted, Joseph Wall wasn't available and there was injuries to Scott Lawton and others, but I don't buy those excuses. We just saw a team like Tampa last night. They had every excuse to be curtains for this season and not rise up to the occasion. And it's been the opposite. Like, that's what happens. Guys step up to the plate. But to me, the bigger story is the first 25 to 30 games when this team, in fact, does go on to miss the Stanley Cup playoffs. I think that's going to be the story, at least for us on that show, is the first 25 to 30 games where it was just very, very inconsistent. They were terrible defensively for the most part, and it included the big guys, including Auston Matthews. It looked like nobody wanted to be there. It was very concerning. I mean, they found their way around Christmas time, not to coincide, but it did with the moving on or the firing of Mark Savard. But to me, that's the grander story. And I know injuries are going to play a factor. They do with every team in the NHL. Like, that's the major line that I read, because, again, it was very, very vague. I think it's important to stress, regardless if he sends this note or not, people are going to pay gross amounts to watch this team. Nobody's going anywhere, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a common refrain from much of Leafs Nation. Like the fans, like it felt like he was trying to draw fans in that you've already got. Like, he was making this almost plea, like, don't worry, we're doing everything we can, and hey, we were really injured, and the schedules like, he brought up the condensed schedule as if it was, and I get it from a corporate standpoint, sure, but I think that he misread the market. Like, this is an intense market with a lot of love and a lot of passion. Fans understand all this stuff. And bringing up the condensed schedule and injuries felt really cheap to me, because it insinuates that other teams in the league are not dealing with that same thing. Everybody's schedule is condensed. And I think that's where maybe for a lot of people, certainly a lot of noise about it yesterday, he missed the mark a little bit, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always careful with people in these roles because I don't know if the goals are the same as somebody like Brad Treliving or like a Craig Berube, where it's like, we want to win. It's all about the rings. But I think somebody like Pelley, it's all about the bottom line and making money. And if you make money, you're being successful at your gig, your operation. You can go out there and say the right things in the media, but honestly, I don't think it matters as much as people think. And so that's why I'm always careful trying to toe that line when I analyze somebody in that role. But it seems to be a theme and has been a theme with Pelley taking over and others before. Like, let's be frank about it. When Brendan Shanahan was in this type of role too, people wondered, what got him going, his motivations, what he was looking to do. Was it about getting to the playoffs and playing games in the playoffs, or did he truly want to win? So I think I'm always careful with the way I handle people in those types of roles, because everybody's got different motivations in every walk of life and every job for that matter.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. And again, that's why I say, like, I guess I can forgive some of it from a corporate perspective. He was brought in to be a corporate leader.
Yeah.
He is not an expert on hockey, but he is an expert in sports business. So I can forgive it from that perspective. I just think that Leaf fans are, I don't know if the term maybe is a little too smart, maybe, to slide stuff like that by. They're going to pick up on that and go, I don't think so. Injuries, condensed schedule. I don't think that that's fair. And so I understand on the other side, some of the outrage that people maybe had or malcontent toward some of the comments. And you can find the letter online if you haven't seen it. It's an interesting read, to say the least. Well, we're a week and a day as we record this away from the NHL trade deadline. Usually a pretty exciting day. Based on the letter, a lot of people are reading real deep into it, thinking that the wording that Keith Pelley put out there means maybe the Leafs won't be sellers and they'll actually try and add some stuff instead. He said, we're going to try and do whatever we can to make the team better. We realize the season hasn't gone the way that we wanted, but we're going to do everything we can to make this team better, to bring that ultimate goal of a cup. Where do you stand on this? I think I kind of know based on watching your show, but for Leaf fans that are watching this right now, what tact do you believe this team should be taking as the deadline approaches, Nick?
They can't buy because they have no assets. So ultimately, it comes down to one of two things. Are you a full-blown seller, or are you looking to restock or retool, whatever precious wording they want to use? They would probably never admit it, but I think they probably understand that's the scenario they're in. Like, they can't be involved on guys like Trocheck and Kadri. They really have to think outside the box. So, for example, maybe who's to say they don't deal a Bob McMahon, pick up those assets, turn around, and then trade for one of these guys? I think that's a likelier scenario. Is it going to happen? Unlikely. I think they also have to be realistic and comprehend and understand that this team just flat out not good enough. We found that out very easily in that game against Tampa, where it's like a year ago, those two teams are neck and neck, and obviously one team has dropped off considerably in the last year, and that's the Maple Leafs. So I think the way they need to approach this is realistically. I keep saying, if Bob McMahon and Scott Lawton, love Toronto so much, then circle back on July 1. We're going to deal you guys right now. We're going to get what we can. If you love it so much, take it as a 2-3 month vacation, come back on July 1, and you could be a Maple Leaf again. Because I think that's the direction this franchise needs to go, where they need to restock a bit. Like, they have zero assets. You're not trading a Danford. You're not trading an Easton Cowan. And that's why you can't be actively involved in some of these big hitters that will be available between now and next Friday. So I think they have to think outside the box. They have to think creatively, but they also have to have the mindset that it's not going to rock the boat as much as they think to trade a Bob McMahon or a Scott Lawton. We're talking about tertiary figures, bottom 6 guys in this team, and people are ready to set the world ablaze because the Maple Leafs are considering trading these guys.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I'd also say, I mentioned it on the Storm broadcast last night, Brad, don't trade Tyler Hopkins either. 6 goals in his last 6 periods of hockey. Don't trade Tyler Hopkins, okay? Just a little pointer for you, Brad. I know you're watching. And that's a big thing too. Like, the Leafs, I think some people maybe don't realize just how dire it is in terms of their farm system and their lack of picks. They only own 50% of their team-owned draft picks over the next 4 years, which is really an incredible stat to look at and absorb when there's such a lack of success based on the star power that this team has boasted over the 9, you could maybe argue 7 of the 9 years that they've been a Stanley Cup playoff contender. It's a tough thing to dig yourself out of. And I really think that if this team tries to buy assets and bring in bigger names at this deadline and trade away what little they do have, I don't know, man. I think that this market might absolutely melt down. I couldn't wait to, if that does happen, I can't wait to hear what Jay Rosehill says.
Oh, he's going to lose his shit. I just think they have to reinvent the way they see this roster. Like, to me, it felt a lot like they were trying to chase the Florida Panthers last summer. And then lo and behold, we're in a world where Florida's unlikely to make the Stanley Cup playoffs. So you can't, what's the old saying? Like, you can't catch a moving train. And that's the feel it has with this Maple Leafs team. So having said that, I think the blue line needs to be reimagined. They need to make some substantial changes there. I think it starts with Morgan Rielly. He's been one of my favorite Leaf for a long period of time, but he just can't hack it anymore. He doesn't bring any value to that blue line. And I think they have to have a very serious conversation about moving on this summer. I think there's some interchangeable pieces right now on that blue line. It's one thing to have guys that are big, But you need them to be mobile and able to skate and move the puck. And you got to find guys like that. I don't know who those names are right now, but you got to find guys like that who can move the puck. And the other thing in general, this is a team thing. They need to get faster. They're really, really slow. There's a couple guys who can motor, Bob McMahon, Nylander, Robertson. But I think as a team, they play very, very slow. And maybe that's more conducive on the current head coach of this team. Maybe they have to change the way they play, and maybe that involves a coaching change. But those are the two things that really, really stick out, aside from the obvious. Even Auston Matthews coming back for the Olympics, and he looks over and he's like, where's Boldy? Where's Gensel? It's like, oh, I got McMahon and Max Domi. I just think there's a lot of flaws with this team. They need to reimagine a couple things here moving forward.
In your opinion, and, you know, if Clarkey was here, he'd be chiming in on Morgan Riley. He feels like that era of the Leafs should be over. He's got some term left at a semi-manageable number at 7.5. I also believe that a change of scenery would probably benefit both parties. When you look at this roster right now, would you describe anybody on it as untouchable?
Aside from Matthew Nyes, no. Nyes
Really?
is the only guy I'm keeping long term on this team, and there's a reason why I didn't include the captain. I didn't include Willie Nylander. No, everybody else would be fair game. Now, granted, I think it's important to stress a lot of these guys have no movement clauses. They're not going to go anywhere if they don't want to go anywhere, and I don't even think the Leafs are entertain such conversations. But Nyes is a guy that I know for a fact got hurt early on. I believe even in training camp, he hurt his knee and hasn't been the same. And it happens a lot in pro sports for some reason. Year one of a new contract, guys fail to live up to expectation. I think Nyes is going to bounce back heavily next year. We've seen early on in his career that this guy's a dog. You want guys like Matthew Nyes on your team. And I think it would be a monster mistake to deal this guy. Not to say that they're even looking at that sort of idea, but he just brings so many different intangibles to the way he plays the game. We've seen a couple times this year where he has been healthy and what he can do and how much of a throwback player he is. So Matthew Nyes is the one guy I think about right now on this roster. He's an untouchable. Everybody else, I'm open to a conversation.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we've gotten to this point with some of these guys. And I mean, really, when we say guys, we're talking about Matthews and Nylander because Marner's already gone and John Tavares signed a sweetheart deal to come back at a low cap number. And I think he's going to end up retiring a Leaf, which I think both sides ended up wanting. So we're really just talking about those two core guys that are supposed to be the engine of the team. And it's interesting that we've gotten to this point, and I would love your take on this. And Clarkie'd be driven insane if he was here, but people say this to me all the time. I mean, you can tell I'm a Capitals fan. My Leaf buddies always go, well, what about what happened with Ovi? And like, it took him a little while. And if you look back though, and I could tell you, you know, the Capitals made a lot of changes on their roster around him and Nick Backstrom. They were really the only two from that Young Guns era that survived to be on that cup winning team that eventually did get it done in 2018. What's your take on the whole thing with Nylander and Matthews being the kind of Ovi and Backstrom in this scenario where let's just be patient, keep these guys around no matter what because they're too hard to replace?
Last time I checked, the supplementary pieces are not equivalent or similar to what the Washington Capitals had. Shout out my boy Devontae Smith-Pelly, by the way.
They're not DSP. What a beauty.
Yeah, like I just, it's a different. You can't compare the two because they're different. I think with Matthews and Nylander, that's probably your best route. This is me, a Leafs fan, thinking your best route to get some more depth to your roster or reimagine your roster. Because the one thing I will say, like, what have they done the last couple of years to try and change the juju or whatever of this team? New GM, new head coach. All right, that didn't work. You know, Marner moves on. That still didn't work. We brought in some supplementary pieces. That hasn't worked. And the one thing they really haven't rocked, and I don't really equate Marner leaving to that conversation, but they really haven't touched the main guys, the nucleus, the main characters, if you will. That includes Riley, that includes Matthews, it includes Nylander. And it's a last case scenario. I think anytime you're trying to trade something like that, you're never going to get right value or fair value. But I do think it's a conversation worth having. I think you have to know what that marketplace would look like. Like, look at the Vancouver Canucks. Yeah, it stinks right now, but they got a pretty damn good return, I would say, for Quinn Hughes, who might not even re-sign with Minnesota, might test the market next year. So I think it's a conversation we'll have more and more leading into next year, maybe even as early as this summer, because I think the Maple Leafs will want to find out rather quickly what the intention is for Auston Matthews, who will be 2 years away from a new contract. So he'll be a UFA in a couple of years. And I just think you have to be very imaginative, creative with your game plan. Now, in a perfect world, you're not moving on from these guys, but if somebody approaches you and gives you an offer similar to what Vancouver got for Quinn Hughes, like, you have to be all ears for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and the way that the contracts are structured, it kind of muddies the water a little bit, but I mean, nothing's impossible. I mean, I always say to guys that are, I have friends tell me, well, they're locked in now, they can't move. Nylander. I'm like, Wayne Gretzky got traded, guys. Like,
yep.
Wayne Gretzky got traded. I don't know what else you really need to say in sport to reference, and negate this notion of the impossibility of making a deal. Like, Wayne Gretzky, I don't know. I know it was a different climate back then and a different financial landscape. It's Wayne Gretzky. I want your take on this too, Nick, and I'm interested to hear your kind of answer on this, because there's a lot that gets made about Toronto and the media. You're part of that media. You guys go after these guys, when it's warranted. I don't think anybody goes over the line necessarily or gets personal with people. But on your shows, you and Jay and Zach, maybe Zach more than the others, go after these guys when it's warranted. And there's this narrative that popped up again during the Olympics. We heard Mark Stone make reference to it with Marner. We heard the Hughes brothers make reference to it with Matthews after they won the gold. Oh, Toronto, that better be nice to this guy now. He's a winner. Come on now, Toronto media. There's this whole narrative that the Toronto media is this big, bad machine and guys just cannot survive under it. What is your kind of take on that? Because I just think it's such a lazy, silly narrative, because this is a market where if things go well, you saw it in the late 90s and early 2000s with those Pat Quinn teams. When things go well, there's not a single place on earth that's better to strap skates on than the market of Toronto. What do you think of this whole thing?
Exactly it. The pros come with the cons. And it's plain and simple for me. If you can't handle the heat, pull a Marner and go hang out in Vegas. That's all I pretty much like to bring up when that conversation is thrown my way, where it's like they're gods. I mean, that was the Marner quote a couple years ago, and after the season, another loss in the playoffs. We're practically gods in this market. I'm paraphrasing, but they really are. And I think people forget that part of the equation or conversation. When Auston Matthews scored 69 goals, we were talking about this guy being the best goal scorer ever. Is he better than Ovechkin? Is he better than Gretzky goal scoring wise? We give these guys praise, okay? And I think the narrative, from the outsiders, they have no clue what the hell goes on in this market. And I think the Marner thing is a lot different. I'm not going to share a lot, but shit happens behind the scenes that people don't know that leads to some of the venom that's said in the media. We'll just leave it at that. So I think it comes with the territory, but it's also one of those things where you literally win in this market. And I mean, even, the Toronto Blue Jays, the way they conduct themselves, I know they lose in Game 7 of the World Series, but that team is beloved in this market. And the biggest reason the last couple of years why they're loved so much is just the intensity and the passion and the love they have for the game and the way they play. I don't think that's too much to ask for. These guys are paid a lot of money. I think that's the biggest reason why when you watch this team the last 10 years is sometimes they look very disenthused. The way they conduct the media is not great sometimes too. And I think the Jays are a perfect example of how you could actually use the market to your benefit, as opposed to like sometimes what happens with the Maple Leafs. But there's no like perfect art to it. I think it's just, again, one of those lazy things that people like to go to And on top of that, I think the hockey world, plain and simple, is just obsessed with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're obsessed with the market. They're obsessed that they know everything they'll say. And that's why Brad Marchand loves to talk every time he plays the Maple Leafs. That's why he loves to talk about the Leafs, because he knows it's going to gather steam. He knows he's going to be the spotlight and everybody's going to talk about him. So they know exactly what they're doing. But I like to say, hey, if you can handle the heat, stay here. We'll love you. And I think Matthews is a prime example of that. He's taken a lot of heat. He's taking on the chin. But damn, he continues to do his thing on the ice, and you have to credit for him. He hasn't ran from anything like some other guys.
He certainly hasn't, and I mean, and I'd include Nylander in that too. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of people that don't love their answers after these crushing playoff losses. I understand that, but you know, I think it just comes down to, again, the con side of it is, you know, their performances in games 5, 6, and 7s. It's well documented. I understand it. But on the other side of it, like I referenced, you know, that 99 run that they went on and the 2002 run, like those teams didn't even get to the Cup final, and people still talk about it, let alone 93, which we don't need to bring up. But those two teams, like they went to the conference final, and people talk about them in absolute reverence. Like if you go to Scotiabank Arena, there is still a healthy amount of Tucker jerseys. My all-time favorite Leaf, Darcy Tucker. What a character. Gary Roberts, Sundin, of course, Caberlet, McCabe. Like they're all over Scotiabank because there's a vintage of fan that remembers that as being kind of the golden years of their fandom. And those guys went to the conference finals. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. It's a different era. And I think the biggest thing that peeves me or bothers me with this team is, like, you know, they have the star power, especially when they had those 4 players where above and beyond talent wise, they had the most talent, or if not top 3 talent in the league as a team. And then they got to the playoffs and they would just no show. Last year, another prime example, they had Florida on the ropes game 5 and 7, inexplicably just a complete no show. And that has been a theme in the last decade. It wasn't just last year. And I think that's what pisses people off. I think that's why people have such a vivid, lasting memory of the Pat Quinn Maple Leafs. Is like, yeah, they lost series, but they battled, and there was wars against Ottawa and Philadelphia and the Islanders, and they really played for one another. They played for the city, and they played for the fan base. And I understand it's 2026. Hockey's played a lot differently, but is it? Because you look at the Florida Panthers, how they won, and Colorado and Vegas and so on and so forth. You need that element of pugnacity, if you will, to steal the term from Brian Burke, some give a fuck, if I can say that. And we just have not seen that from this group. I mean, we've had moments, but haven't seen that consistently. And that's, I think, what generally pisses people off about these guys.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I want to ask you, you know, obviously you're a diehard Leaf fan. You host a show about them. And again, I'd encourage everybody to get on the website, follow them on socials, subscribe. The YouTube channel's unbelievable. There's so much good stuff on there. A lot of fun conversations. LeafsNation.com. I'm curious, you know, how you kind of fell in love with the game and some of your favorite Leafs and Leaf memories from when you were growing up that continue to fuel your passion now.
Yeah, so the funny story is, and I always get this on Twitter because I tweet about the Blue Jays, people say, stay in your lane. Well, I rebuttal with baseball's my number one sport. I fell in love with baseball first among any other sport. I played competitive baseball, travel ball growing up. I was the kid that went to the park on Saturdays and hung out there from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. watching tournament baseball and just like learning my craft and watching older people play the game. And I would just say, like, really start to fall in love with it because I had a bunch of buddies. I grew up in Oakville. I was born in Montreal, though. Moved to Oakville when I was 5. A lot of buddies who played really good hockey and were really good at hockey. And I'd go watch them play and start to really fall in love. And then really got into the NHL. As a big video game player, I'd buy the video game and do like the play-by-play in front of the TV, put the volume down. But I would say like the Pat Quinn era is my vintage, what really, really got me cooking. 98, 99, 97, 2000, 2001. I love the fact, and it was so different. And I think it's a big reason why things have changed in the last 25 years is social media. you would wait all day. You'd go to school during the national anthem at school. You'd just be thinking about the game. Lunchtime, you'd be talking about the game with your buddies. And then the countdown would be on, the final bell. And then you head home and just wait for that game. You watch the opening montage on CBC and you just be so fired up because you didn't know what the hell is going to happen. Like there could be murder on the ice. And I think that was the amazing aspect of the NHL back in that day. These guys hated each other. You don't get the disdain or the hatred anymore. And I get it. All these guys are buddies, all-star games and Olympics and, their NHL teams, like training in the summer. Like the access that we have now on social media has been a pro and con of life in general. But I think more so in sport, everybody's buddy. And that's why I think it's honestly difficult if you had to pinpoint and talk to a guy and they would tell you firsthand and real about it, why they can't get up and play that gritty game in the playoffs because they know everybody on the ice. Like, you really going to try to hurt your friend? And granted, there are select people in this league. The Tkachuk brothers come to mind. Brad Marchand, they don't give a shit who you are. You could be their best friend. They still want to win. There's still guys like that. But I think generally that's why I love that era of Maple Leafs hockey because they played with so much pizzazz and anger and hatred and grit. Everything you want to see from a championship winning team. And it was headlined, of course, by their head coach, Pat Quinn, who just hear legendary story after legendary story. Of course, he was the coach and GM for many, many years. They had that je ne sais quoi that dragged the fan even into the fight, if that makes sense.
You're absolutely right. And I remember that era so well because, Pat, God rest him, one of the all-time beauties in the game. And so many guys from that era have amazing stories. I always love when O-Dog talks about him on Overdrive. The loop-de-loops. We can't do the loop-de-loops, boys. It's amazing. And I think that's the thing that Toronto fans now are yearning for when there's this perceived heat on the guys that are there now. The stars of that team back then, the Roberts, the Tuckers, those guys didn't have any friends on the ice. Yeah. I don't know if they had many off the ice because of some of the stuff they did. Like when Darcy Tucker's submarine hit Michael Pekka and blew his ACL out, I thought that the state of Rhode Island was going to kill Darcy Tucker. It was an unbelievable time. Like you think to those, somebody sent me a reel the other day, like remember watching this as a kid, and it was a reel of Scott Stevens just killing people. And I missed that. Like when he killed Slava Kozlov and his head turned sideways. And then Scott Stevens looked down the Detroit bench at Darren McCarty and said, "You're next, do up your chin strap." It fired me up. I wanted to go for a run. I was like, that was awesome. I don't care what anybody says. The game's changed a lot. That was the best era of hockey, in my opinion, man.
Oh, it was unreal. Like, again, just getting up for those games. And, to your question earlier on, Matt Sundin was one of my favorites. You still have Berezin and Cabriolet and McCabe. Like, that's why this show's been a lot of fun to put together. Obviously, I have access to a lot of these people and names and numbers, and the Rolodex in the last 15 years is pretty exquisite. But to go back down memory lane, like even I'm buddies now with Travis Green. He's coming on the show tomorrow. The Senators are in town on Saturday. He was part of those Pac-Win teams, and just have a couple beers with him and shoot the shit about that era. It's pretty electric stuff. I don't think we're ever going to get back to a point where there was that much, venom or hatred or animosity, because again, social media, I don't want to say has ruined everything, but it's changed everything. And so that's why, and I think Matthew Knies is a prime example. Like, he enters the fray and people look at him and they're like, holy crap, what a throwback. You can't have a team full of those guys anymore, but I think you have to find a way to have as many guys who think that way,
Yeah, you certainly do. And like the stuff that Matt Knies gets involved in is tame compared to what Tucker and like Gary Roberts looked like he was constantly going to absolutely kill somebody. He looked like he was going to kill his own teammates sometimes on the ice. If you didn't do what he expected of you, it's crazy. There's very few kind of loose in the cage animals in the league. Marchand, who's on the back nine. Yeah, the Tkachuk brothers, more so Brady in the violent sense. Matt is kind of more of a, he just kind of needles people. Yeah, like Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson might be
Yeah,
the
closest to.
closest thing to it.
Yeah.
I really, it's hard to find these guys that are involved like that. And I don't know if involved is necessarily a fair word. All these guys would tell you they're trying and they care about winning. I guess to people like us, it just feels kind of different because it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's fear in the game anymore. Like, that's what I always
How
like to
can
get
there
back
be?
to. Yeah, it's like that's all we like, not to speak for Rosie, but that's all we ask for. Like, be a bitch to play against. Like if you're playing a star player and they have to think about all day, like, I'm using Matthew Nyes as an example. They got to think all day, like, what's Nyes going to do? Is he going to take a run at me? Is he going to give me a cheap shot? And I guarantee that's a guy's feel when they play Matthew Tkachuk or like a Brad Marchand, where you sort of step away from your game because you're always looking around. You're like, is this guy going to elbow me? Like, is something going to happen that's going to piss me off and throw me off my game? These guys back in that day, I think what made them such unicorns, they were able to throw you off their game, but they're also able to back it up. Like, if you want to go, we'll dance. And I think we see these types of players now and few and far between, and there's a bunch of them who can still hack it. But a lot of the guys these days will piss you off, but they really can't answer the bell. They don't need to answer the bell. That was the great thing about the story 25 years ago, is guys would answer the bell. That's what made the game so awesome.
Yeah, it was a very different mentality, that's for sure. Obviously, you mentioned everybody that watches this, tune in tomorrow. Travis Green coming on the show. That's a good tease. You guys have a lot of interesting guests on there. It's not all Leafs. I mean, it's Leaf-centered. I got to ask you, he's a great friend of this show. My co-host, Chris Clark, worked at, Leafs TV for a long time, developed a very, very close relationship with the great Joe Bowen. You guys had him on recently, and, I've talked with him a number of different times. When you think about how historically significant he is in Leafs lore and Leafs culture for numerous generations of fans, how important was it to be able to have Bonesy on and talk about him going out, Holy Mackinac night, the whole nine, and what are some of your favorite memories of hearing Joe Bowen?
It's unfortunate because this is the way he's going to go out, with a whimper, right? This team's going to miss the Stanley Cup playoffs. I have I had the unique ability to work alongside Bonesy and Ralphie for a couple of years. I mean, I know it's different and I know it's a different era, but people think I just started a YouTube channel. I worked for 15 years as a broadcaster, but along the way, I did a couple of seasons as the radio host of the Maple Leafs broadcast on Fan 590. So what Ailish and Justin do now, I was them before them with Gord Stellick, who's a former GM, cup of tea with the Maple Leafs, AGM in the league as well. Now, of course, works for NHL Network Radio. So I was lucky enough to say that I worked alongside Joe Bowen and Jim Ralph, and that included throwing to commercials and stuff like that, or throwing to them to start the game. Like, it was a really, really cool experience to see these guys work behind the scenes, not to mention during a pandemic, calling the game from a screen. That's a bigger joke, that these guys don't travel. We're talking about a $1 billion corporation and entity, and they can't send their broadcasters, especially two legends in Joe Bowen and Jim Ralph, on the road. Story for another day, but I thought it was important. It's unfortunate that it's ending this way. It's unfortunate it's ending this year, period, for Joe Bowen. But just an absolute legend. I grew up with this guy. Again, I thought it was so amazing that I got to work alongside him. I went to school actually with his son, so fostered a relationship with one of his sons, Sean, who still works with the organization. In fact, a couple of his kids still work with the organization. One's in the room. Sean used to be in the room. Now he works for the Argos and the Maple Leafs and doing some different broadcast stuff behind the scenes. He does really, really good stuff. But, to tap in from that aspect with Joe Bowen was really cool. So it felt like a no-brainer. It took a while to get him on the show for a variety of reasons over the last couple of years. Finally got him to okay it here because it is his final season, and I'm sure down the stretch we'll have him on again. But too many calls to list. I mean, any Matt Sundin call ever, that era specifically, bless you boys, even from a couple of years ago. Like, it's
the one, man.
Yeah, there's so many. Again, it was cool to catch him do playoff games. Granted, I got a bit screwed because the 2 years I did, I started and I did the games from the arena, and I remember signing off from Scotiabank Arena after a win against Tampa. And I'm like, we'll see you Thursday night. Nashville Predators in town. Game never happened. So that was the lasting memory I had of that role. And then the rest was done hybrid version from the studio in Toronto. So different feel, but still two absolute gems. I'm going to really, really miss just, I go to the games. I have media passes all the time, just bumping in to Ralphie and Bones at Scotiabank. It's going to be a bit different here.
Yeah, absolute legends. He's an absolutely outstanding guy, too. He's given me lots of advice. Friend of this show, obviously. And I think my favorite story that he's told it on this show, is when Nikolai Borshevsky scored that OT winner to eliminate the Red Wings. That whole series, the visiting radio booth was right up against the fans at the old Olympia. And so fans were giving it to Joe the whole time, up there, giving it to him, throwing some paper planes at him, the whole deal. And when Borshevsky scored that goal, like, he's right over top of these Detroit fans. And when he yelled, Borshevsky scores, Leafs win, he was pointing in the face of the Red Wings fans, and they just kind of stood there and took it. That's my favorite. Yeah. I was like, yes, get vindictive with it, Bonesy. It's the best. What a legend. Deserved. We talk about, this team deserved to win. That guy, God, he deserved a cup. Deserved a cup more than almost anybody else. What an absolute legend that guy was and remains. Really good stuff. I want to ask you quickly, too, before we wrap this show up. I really appreciate your time. You're a beauty. Again, everybody, follow the Leafs Nation. Subscribe to the shows on YouTube, especially if you're a Leafs fan. You're missing out if you're not subscribed to these guys. Nick, you're a gem. The NHL games, they're a huge part of all of our childhoods growing up. Give me, if you can, your top 3 NHL soundtrack tunes, because that was a big part of it every year. What's on the soundtrack?
Can't even think.
I'll give
you
mine.
Specific. Yeah, go ahead. Give me yours. I can't think of the names.
The number one NHL track of all time is off NHL 03. It's Sweetness by Jimmy Eat World. That's number one. Yeah. I'm a big metal guy. Deftones, Minerva. That was on NHL 04. And Franz Ferdinand, Take Me Out.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Dude.
Yeah.
See you later. Those would be my top 3.
Okay, no, it's fair. It's funny. I just sold my PS5, so my era of video games is finished. I got tired of the NHL game. It was the same shit every year, so I just called it a
now.
Yeah, I know. Funny thing about that is I was in between jobs a couple of years ago, and I have a buddy or a buddy of a buddy who works at EA Sports, and so he actually got me a call. Because I was like, how do I intertwine these two careers? And I'm looking outside the box, and I'm like, it'd be pretty damn cool to work doing the video games. So I had a call with one of the producers there. It didn't come to fruition, obviously, but we had a lengthy chat just about the game, how much I play it, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, probably just picking my brain and how to excel. But what I learned is how difficult it is to tinker. I don't know much about technology and computers and all that, but how much it is to tinker with the little things, even the little things, because I had mentioned some things that I like, but yeah, I grew up playing that stuff. MVP baseball, it's one of my favorites. The Pujols one, the one with Pujols on the cover, the Ramirez one.
Yes.
Great era of video games. Now it's a lot different, but yeah, the era, it's officially over. I sold my PS5, man. It's done. Cooked.
I completely understand it. Sports games, they're in the toilet, man. It's really unfortunate, but we were in the best era of it, which is
we were.
Good thing. Well, despite that being over for you, what's not over is your fantastic work with the Leafs Nation. Again, everybody, please subscribe. Follow these guys, especially if you're a Leaf fan. You need to be involved with the Leafs Nation. Nick Alberga, the Golden Muzzy himself, you're a beauty, buddy. Thanks so much for doing this, eh?
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. We'll talk soon, okay?
We'd absolutely love to have you back on. Remember, everybody, you can watch this show on Rogers TV, on YouTube. Find it across all your favorite podcast apps. We'll be back next week with more Instigating with Clarkie and Drury. We'll see you then.